abstract thing. And George R. R. Martin is a really big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, so a lot of that blends into his story. So Melisandre is a red priest, and her magic, we don't really know much about it. Even in the last book, we get a better idea because she gets a point of view chapter, but she's still like this mysterious, like, what the fuck's up with Melisandre? So, the day of their the day of their battle between Renly Baratheon and Stannis Baratheon. Renly, when he's donning his armor, with help from a girl named Brienne, who is a female knight, which is like really bad. If you're a female knight, you're like she's like crazy tall. She's like an orc. Like she's like, she's super strong.
That's not okay.
But okay, don't worry. She's not one of those. She's not POC. We're good. But yeah, and everyone hates her. They call her like the Maid of Tarth because she's from like Tarth, the Moonlands. And like everyone's like calls her Brienne the Beauty, but she's an ugly like troll. And like Renly kind of keeps her around because she's a goofster, but she's really strong. Like she is a knight. She has like the chops to go on against anyone, right? So she loves Renly. Like Renly is like this charming, charismatic character. Everyone loves a Baratheon that isn't Stannis, right? And then all of a sudden, he's donning his armor. A shadow that looks like Stannis slices him through his mail, through his hauberk, through his leathers, everything. Slices him in half. He dies, right? And then Renly has his own Kingsguard because he's King Renly now, right? He calls himself king, right? And they're called the Rainbow Guard. They walk up and they're like, "What happened, Brienne? You killed Renly?" And she's like, "No, it was a shadow." And they're like, Cap. So they try to kill and arrest Brienne, right? But luckily, Catelyn Stark was there to save Brienne. She goes, "No, it was Stannis. Someone from Stannis tried to killed Renly." And they're like, they're ready to accept that like quick, because that makes sense. Oh, Stannis? Of course, it's Stannis, right? So they go looking for the assassin. So before things get super duper bad, Catelyn leaves with Brienne quickly, and now that Renly's dead, Stannis gets to get his army for free. Because who are they gonna follow, huh? Renly's dead. You're gonna follow fucking Stannis. He's the next Baratheon. But Stannis hates to pardon these guys, and Stannis has a very important reason why he's such a hard man. The Man of Steel. So Stannis Baratheon is the middle son of the Baratheons, right? And he lives that all his life, like always in the shadow of his older brother, Robert Baratheon, who's able to win kingdoms, wins hearts, and he's just like this kind of like bitter. He's not like strong and thick like his brothers. He's kind of spindly, and he's like strong like wire, but he's not built like a bull like every one of his brothers, right? But during Robert's rebellion, he wanted to prove himself, right? To prove that he is a good, loyal, and strong man. A loyal man to Baratheon. He believes in honor to his final breath. So he holds this castle called Storm's End against the Tyrells, right? And the Tyrells, they lock up the sea, because it's a castle on the sea, they board up the sea so no ships can go by, right? And they stop anyone from going in and out, and they try to starve them out, because Storm's End is the seat of the Baratheon. So if that falls, the war for rebellion, like Robert's rebellion, will go into flames. So he tries his damnedest to stay there, and he stays there for 2 years, and eventually is forced to eat leather boots, rats, and some horrible stuff, right? So he's like about to die, but luckily there's this guy named Davos, right? Who's a smuggler who goes around just, not paying taxes, trading, giving illegal goods. But he has, pity for Stannis and his men. So he goes on the cover of night, gets a bunch of onions and like potatoes, onions and apples, right? And he sails through these things. It's called Shipbreaker Bay, because all these ships crash into these rocks. But he's such a good smuggler, he knows all the routes, and he goes through the Tyrell lines and gives these onions and apples and feeds Stannis' army in order to hold till Ned Stark gets his army to lift the siege for the Tyrells, right? Stannis survived, and he did a great job holding Storm's End. So when Robert Baratheon shows up, he goes, Ned, you did a great job getting rid of those Tyrells. Hey, Stannis, how's it going? Yeah, Ned, you did a great job. We gotta get King's Landing. So no respect for what Stannis has done for Robert. Like, he is loyal to his older brother because he feels like he has to. It's your duty to help your older brother, right? And that's what he believes in. Even though he fucking hates his brother and it sucks, he's still gonna follow to those words because he feels like he has to distinguish himself from both his brothers. And it's kind of sad, you know? He gets this unloving wife who can barely get kids, and when he finally gets one daughter, she gets infected with this horrible disease called grayscale, right? That petrolizes your face and turns it all gray, and it kills most people, but if you survive it as an infant, you survive, right? Like, you're permanently scarred with grayscale on your face, right? So this is the one thing Stannis is not going to let go. After Storm's End, after his brother Robert Baratheon doesn't give him the family seat, because, you know, Robert Baratheon is the king. He doesn't need to, like, rule Storm's End, but he gives Storm's End his family seat to Renly, because he's cooler than Stannis. So he's stuck on this dreary place called Dragonstone, and it sucks, it's cold, and it scares his daughter, right? It's like Stannis has been through a lot. And he's still loyal to his brother to his dying breath. You know, before his brother dies, he tries to expose Cersei, preparing an army to help his brother away from these illegitimate kids that aren't his own. Right? But when Renly goes up and says, I'm going to take the kingship, Stannis refuses. Because that's the one thing, he's not going to let this go, no matter what. He let all these slights to his honor all his life, and this is the one thing he's not going to let go. The kingship of Westeros. Right? So he's gonna fight tooth and nail in order to get this kingdom. And he lasted the siege for 2 years, eating rats and boot leather. You think he's gonna give up after a few defeats? No. He's willing to do anything to get this kingship. Right? So Renly dies from a mysterious cause. A shadow, or like maybe it was a trap, maybe it was assassin. No one knows how Renly died. So everyone's like, what the fuck? I guess we gotta... All the Tyrell lords all went to Stannis, except for one. Like, all the kingdoms in the Reach, except for one. And that's the Tyrell, the head house of the Reach, right? The heir runs away. He runs away and he goes to Highgarden, the capital, right? And Stannis is like, I can't get that guy. Who cares? I need to get Storm's End, right? And he needs to get one of Robb's bastards. Because Cersei's incest is widespread. He sends letters everywhere. But you don't have evidence. You can't prove that someone's an incest baby, right? But what he's going to do is he's going to get one of Robb or Robert Baratheon's old bastards, right? His name is Eldrick Storm, right? And he looks just like Robert, right? And he's going to look at this ugly blonde child compared to this Chad black-haired child. Because, the Baratheons are known for their coal black hair, not blonde, right? So it's clear evidence that, yeah, this is a true Baratheon child. That is a monster of incest. So he's going to use that kid in order to prove his case, to get the throne, right? But the Keeper of Storm's End views that kid as a son. Like, Robert, no joke, okay, this is another big thing Robert did, is he fucked a girl on his marriage bed, which is super disrespectful, and got her pregnant. And she was a highborn lady. So he was forced to acknowledge the bastard instead of just ignoring it, like he does all his other children. But the kid, Eldrick Storm, loves his dad, loves Robert Baratheon, views him as a hero, even though he never cared about him. All the gifts he was sent by some dude he hired to send him, which is really fucked up. right? So like the keeper of Storm's End, the Castellan, loves this kid, and Stannis is like, hey, all I want is you to. He gives him really good terms. Okay, you can keep your arms, you can walk away, you can join my army. We're not gonna take any lives, but I need Eldrick Storm. And then the dude, he goes, then no, right? He's super snarky, he's super cool, and he challenges Stannis to like 1v1 combat, a trial by combat, in order to like, you know, not do a siege, because a siege takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of work. It takes months, it takes like days. Like a siege is a big commitment for both armies. You know, if you're on top of the wall and someone below the wall, bro, you have a major advantage. So even if you have like a bunch of numbers, a person on the wall is worth 10 times men below them, right? So a siege is just so bloody, and no one wants that. So another drone strike, it's called. So we learn what was the shadow that killed Renly. So Melisandre, she's looking kind of like big, right? He goes, Davos, I want you to get Melisandre and do this mission with her, right? And he's like, okay, sure. And Melisandre, she's looking kind of big. She looks almost pregnant, right? And it's super weird. And Davos is like talking about it. And they talk about honor and what it means to be a good person. And he's like, Davos, oh yeah, I forgot to mention this. This is really important. For thanks for saving Stannis Baratheon from starvation during the Siege of Storm's End, he gives Davos a knighthood, this base-born smuggler knighthood. But for smuggling for years, he takes off his 3 fingers of his right hand. Or was it his left hand? Probably his left hand. Yeah, his right hand. Damn, that sucks. Yeah, 3 fingers off his right hand for smuggling, right? And he's like, he says the bad doesn't outweigh the good, just like the good doesn't outweigh the bad, you know? You smuggled for years, but you did this great service. You're gonna get both, a punishment and a boon, right? That's his version of justice, right? And Davos, despite, you know, losing 3 fingers, respects him for that, because Stannis stands by his principles. And Melisandre says, you know, if there's one rotten piece on the onion, doesn't mean the whole onion is rotten, right? And she's talking about Davos being like a hypocrite about certain things, you know. He tries to be an honorable knight, but he's a smuggler. He breaks the laws, right? And they have this cool talk about morality that ultimately is a conversation on whether Stannis Baratheon is a just man, right? It's really subtle stuff. And at the end, they go to like this gate to like Storm's End, and you can't open up the gate because they don't have the keys. They don't have anyone to open it. But there's these weird spells on Storm's End where you can't use magic unless you're in or under the building, and they're in the building because they kind of like sail to this little cove near Dragonstone. And Melisandre like sits down and she gives birth. She gives birth, like a black tar thing comes out of her. Right? And it looks like Stannis, right? Davos describes it as it was young and then it grew and it had the face of Stannis. And then the next day, the person who held the Castellan of Storm's End dies of a mysterious fall. And Stannis doesn't have to do a siege anymore. Storm's End is his, right? But when you look at Stannis again, he looks older. He looks more rotten. He looks weaker, right? So maybe all those people call them shadow babies or shadow fetuses, all that takes a part of him out of him, right? Which is almost like his honor. It takes a piece of like what makes Stannis good, his integrity, and it's taken away by Melisandre, right? And it's this push and pull. Like Stannis is in the middle, and Davos tells Stannis to follow his ideals. You know, you believe in justice and honor and giving people what they deserve, right? And Melisandre gives him power and a way to get what he desires, which is the throne, right? So Stannis has to pick between these two kind of evils. Should I sacrifice my honor, the one thing that I have to say that I am a good man, or should I give it up in order to have a chance to get what I truly wanted? Respect and the kingdom. So Stannis has his men. Stannis has the army, and he's gonna attack King's Landing with all his force of both Highgarden and the Stormed Lands. So he is beefed up, right? Now we're gonna talk about the Starks. So, Robb Stark, King of the North, King Robb, is in trouble. Tywin Lannister has units across this river, right? And he needs a way to flank them, right? He has this 10 billion IQ gamer plan to beat Tywin Lannister in the field. And Tywin Lannister is one of the best generals around. He is the head of House Lannister, right? So he has to make a deal of the Lord of the Crossing. What was it? Wyman Frey?
Walder Frey.
Walder Frey, thank you. How do you know the names? How do you remember them?
It's fun to say.
Yeah, that's true. So Walder Frey, he's, okay, I love Walder Frey. He's an old dude, right? Who has so many heirs that he can't even remember them all. And half of them are named Walder after him, right? And he's been the Lord, he survived like 4 or 5 marriages, right? And each like, he jokes that he's gonna outlive every single person in this war, right? And he's like ancient. He's like 80, he's like 90, and that's super duper old for like Westerosi time, right? 'Cause you just die of like some random disease. You die from a paper cut when you're like 5 years old. It's insane. And he has like a 16-year-old wife. It's super weird, but like he has to get Frey's assistance because they control the twins, right? There's these weird towers. They're like mirrored. One tower is right here on one side of the river, and the other tower is right here, right? And they control who goes through this river, right? So you need the permission of the Lord of the Crossing to cross, right? And, you know, Robb, you know, he still has a lot of clout. He still has a lot of influence after beating Jaime Lannister in the field, after winning every single battle, right? And Walder Frey gives him these conditions. The person who talks to Walder Frey is Catelyn, his mommy, and they come up with a marriage pact. Every one of the Stark's children must marry a Frey. Must marry a Frey. It is a marriage pact because he wants to have a grandson of a king, right? Because he has such a big ego of himself, right? And Robb and Catelyn reluctantly accept because they need to cross the river. And it works. And they have all the power of House Frey on their side, which is like 1,000 knights, which is pretty damn good, right? So they're able to like win way more battles, right? And it's super duper cool, right? So House Stark is doing pretty good, but they make an alliance with Frey. Do not break this marriage pact. Now we gotta talk about. I think we'll talk about King's Landing. Because Tyrion, he's free. Our boy Tyrion, with the help of Bronn, gets out of the Vale, right? Basically gambled his ways out. But he gets attacked by these barbarians, right? These fucking like, you know, they're called the Moon Men, right? The Mountains of the Moon. Right, and there's all these crazy tribes, like Storm Crows and Burned Men and Dog Women. Like they're called weird stuff, but they have like these strange customs, right? But like they can't. There's no way they're gonna survive their way down this mountain, right? So Tyrion comes up with an idea. Like I can't fight them. Let them join me, right? So he like builds a fire, and then like he's eating food with Bronn, and then like the barbarians show up, right? And he's like, "Oh, come to my fire. There's food for everyone." And they go, "Yeah, food for me on my mountain." Right? So he's about to fucking like, right? But then like he says like Tyrion says a funny joke, right? And then the dude's like, "You know what? This guy's funny. Kill the mercenary and he can entertain the ghosts." Right? And then Tyrion says, "Stop." And like they have this greeting, the Moon Men. They go, "I am Timett, son of Timett," right? Like my father's name and then my name, of the Burned Men, right? So, you know, Tyrion responds, "I am Tyrion, son of Tywin of House Lannister," right? And essentially, he talks his way to broker a deal between the Moon Men, saying, I will get you good steel, solid weapons, and the best stuff in Casterly Rock if you escort me to my father. Right? And because he's so charming, he's like Land the Clever Reborn. They believe him, right? So they get escorted to Casterly Rock, right? And he meets Tywin, right? And you think, oh, Tyrion's gonna betray these fucking mountain men. He just lied to them. But no, Tyrion fulfills his promise, gives these guys good steel, and recruits them in Tywin's army. A Lannister always pays his debts. If you help a Lannister, he's gonna rise you high. They respect their allies. Those are the words of House Lannister, right? So Tywin is warring. So he's like, Tyrion, your sister's stupid. The small council sucks. I'm going to need you to go to King's Landing and defend the city, right? And this is like the first time Tyrion's getting responsibility, right? Because all his life, Tyrion has been seen as the imp, right? And that connotation sticks with him for his whole life, right? And Tyrion has this need to be loved and respected because of this horrible thing that happened to him. One day, he tells this to Bronn. Well, they're sitting down in the Mountains of the Moon, thinking they're gonna die. So Tyrion decides to tell this story to Bronn. When Tyrion was only like around 13, 14, right? A bandit went by this crafter's daughter and robbed her, right? And they're in this place called Lannisport. And, the Lannisters own Lannisport. So Jaime Lannister, being the brash dude he is, he takes it as a slight to his family's honor. So he's like, I'm going to hunt down these fucking guys. You take care of the crafter's daughter, right? So Tyrion takes care of her, right? And she's kind of cute, And, for some reason, she kind of likes Tyrion, too, being this little dwarf guy, right? And they end up, having sex that night. Right? And and that's how he loses his virginity. And he's like, whoa, bro. It's like the first time, because Tywin hates his son, all the time. He never had a mom, because when he was born, he killed his mom in childbirth, right? Being born, right? So he never really had this feeling of connection with someone. And her name was Tysha, and Tysha was his everything for a long time. So he goes against House Lannister. He marries a peasant. The one thing you can't do as a high-born lord, marry a peasant, and he does it. He marries Tysha, and they have this nice little house on the cottage. It's like they act like man and wife for a long time. They get a drunk scepter to do the marriage, so it's anointed. But Tywin finds out. Tywin finds out he marries Tysha, and one day he brings Tyrion in a room, right? And Tysha's there, and all of the guards of Casterly Rock is there, right? And he says to Tyrion, yeah, Tysha, that girl, she's just a whore. She's a whore I hired for you to have sex for the first time. She never loved you. All she cares about is money, right? And each one of the guards have fuck her, have sex with her, and give her 1 silver coin, right? And by the end of it, her hands were so filled with silver coins are spilling out of her hands. Exactly. But the worst part is Tywin went up to Tyrion and he said, it's your turn, boy. It's your turn to fuck her. And he gives him a golden dragon, right? Because the Lannisters are worth more than the common man, right? And his cock betrayed him and he fucked her anyways, right? But this scars him completely. Because he feels like no one can love him for who he is. Because 1, he's a dwarf, and 2, he's a Lannister. If someone's going to like me, it's because of my house name. It's because of my gold. It's because of where I come from. They don't care about me for me, right? And this kind of hole inside him causes him to do tons of self-destructive things, right? And overestimate people's loyalties, right? And that's something that is inflicted by Tywin, right? His father. But now that Jaime's captured by, Robb Stark, Tyrion's kind of his only son right now. So he's like, oh, fine, I'll work with my ugly dwarf son. I'll give him responsibility, right? And kind of teaches him to be his heir, right? And this is like the respect, the love, the things he needs most. So he trusts his father, and he tries his best to respect his house, right? And he goes to King's Landing to do his best to make sure the kingdom won't fall against Stannis, right? Because Stannis, he's bulked up. He has both Renly and the Storm Lords on his side, and he's most likely going to crush the capital because Stannis is a great military tactician, right? So Tyrion really has to think of a way to stop Stannis and make sure King's Landing is safe. But, Tyrion's a horny guy. He gets prostitutes all the time. He fucks all the time. And it's mostly a way to get away from his pain. It's like to feel like I'm loved. People care about me, even though I give them $1 bill to fuck me. Suck my little dwarf dick. Like Peter Dinklage dick. Right?
Don't judge the man with it,
Don't judge, hey, I know.
It's still getting inside.
But the thing is, he gets a new concubine. Or a new Tysha. Her name is Shay, right? She's probably called something different in the show, but she's called Shay. Name? Okay. Her name is Shay, and she's like this kind of cute camp follower, and they have pillow play, right? She goes, "Oh my lord," and she like sucks his dick and all that good stuff. But the main thing is she's like, "Oh my god, my giant of Lannister," like while he's fucking her. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a fucking giant. Yeah, I'm a fucking giant." Right? Because that's a plug into mom, man. It's so, but she's the one who started it. But he's like, he likes it. He's like, "Yeah, I'm a giant Lannister. That's cool. That's epic." She's witty, she's smart, she's sweet, and she knows how to excite him. Tyrion starts kind of falling for this concubine, and it feels pretty genuine. Tysha actually kind of cares. Says all the nice things she needs to say to Tyrion. And she comes from a really shitty house. Her dad fucked her. Her mom was a prostitute. She's down bad. So being with Tyrion Lannister is pretty sweet. Being a camp follower is pretty sick when you're the camp follower of Tyrion Lannister. You're his favorite horde. Right? So all this shit happens. And Tyrion prepares an epic plan to meet Stannis. Right? Cersei and everyone in the small council are a bunch of manlets. They're a bunch of brainlets. They don't think. They don't think. Cersei says, "I want 1,000 swords," and Tyrion's like, "Why, bro? Why? Why do you want 1,000 swords? We're under siege. We don't need swords when we're under siege. We need siege equipment." So what he does is he comes up with this cool plan. Because King's Landing is by this river called the Blackwater. Is it a river? Yeah, it's a river that goes all the way. Yeah. Yeah, it's called the Blackwater, right? And a whole fleet of ships can go there and just totally fuck you up, right? So it's dangerous. So Tyrion comes up with this good strategy. Using the wildfire that Cersei's been making, he decides to make this big ass chain. This fat chain that goes all across the bay, right? Right, and the plan is he's going to lift up the chain so the ships can escape and then pour napalm or wildfire on the ships so they burn, right? So they're unable to reach the shores to go to King's Landing, right? To actually do any real fighting, right? That's his plan. And people are fighting him every step of the way, but he's so clever. He makes alliances with Dawn, and he's basically like this cool politician that's been running the kingdom, yeah?
So he's gonna tripwire the ships, or just to stop them so he can.
Yeah, basically they're gonna walk into the bay because it's kind of like a peninsula to get into the port.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a straight kind of line. So when they go in, he's gonna lift up the chain so they can't reverse, they can't leave.
Oh.
Like they can't row out and then they throw the fire. But yeah, he makes a lot of smart financial decisions. But Joffrey hates him, and Joffrey's such a piece of shit. I'm gonna talk about Joffrey. I love Joffrey. He's hilarious. He's the imagine the worst runty brat kid you can imagine, and give him all the power of Westeros. You get Joffrey Baratheon, right? He beats Sansa all the time for just existing, because her brother's fighting in this war, right? And he's beating his grandfather multiple times. So he's like, "Sansa, this is all your fault. Robb won this fight because of you." Gregor no, not Gregor. No, that guy would kill her. Sandra Clegane, can you please beat her up? Can you strip her naked and beat her up? Right? And they just do it because they're the King's Guard. What are you gonna do? Say no? You're the King's Guard. Right? So this like 13-year-old, 14-year-old gets punched, gets kicked, is humiliated. Like, Joffrey goes up to Sansa and she's like, you want to see your dad's skull? I have your dad's skull hung up on a spike on the top of King's Landing. We're gonna look at it. You're gonna look at it. Or my knights in white armor are gonna beat the shit out of you. Right? So she's like, I guess I'll see it. Right? And she becomes like so numb that she's like you're going like cross-eyed. You're like, she can't even see it. Right? And she has her own plans, right? She has her own plans of trying to escape. Thanks to this guy named Florian. Was it Florian? The fool who helped her? He just calls himself Florian. Like, she helps a fool from being executed. And he's like, oh my god. And he's like a drunken knight. He's like, oh my god, Sansa. You know what? And he always tries to kiss her. It's really weird. But he's like your drunk uncle. But he agrees to try to help Sansa escape with a ship. Right? So she like entertains him. She's like, oh yeah, Florian, you're my phone. Yeah, you're my phone. Thank you. So that's Sansa. And Joffrey's just such a piece of shit. I can't even name all the crazy shit he does. You guys really gotta read the book to see it, just how crazy Joffrey is. But after all that's all the pieces settled, I think. And Balon Greyjoy, the last king, he's still warring in the north, right? The climax of the book is Theon and what he does in Winterfell, right? And it's like a shockwave that hits every single person, right? But first, the Battle of the Blackwater, right? A famous battle. Stannis versus Lannister in King's Landing. And the plan that, Tyrion wants to do, it works, sorta. Right? The wildfire that he poured on the ships didn't spread good enough, right? So some men were able to go on the bay to go invade King's Landing, right? And someone has to like take up the charge. But not a lot of people want to, be the first person to fight people in like burning green fireland, right? And especially not, Sandor Clegane. He's scared of fire and he flees, right? And everyone views him as a craven coward, betrayer, because he has a white club too. You're supposed to protect the king for life, right? But because of this battle, he just doesn't want to. He doesn't want to lead a charge. So the person who leads the charge is fucking Tyrion. He's the only person who's willing to take up this charge, and it's important because it's this bridge of ships. All the broken ships made like this little bridge to reach the mainland, right? Which is really fucking bad, right? So he fights on this bridge of ships, right? And I'm not doing this justice because it's so sick. Like it's in Davos' perspective, right? And Davos has like 7 sons. Like he has a lot of sons, right? And they're all knights. They're all like proud. They're all great. And Davos talks to this guy. I think it was the admiral was from House Florent, right? House Florent. And he wants to charge in because what is Stannis gonna do, right? We have the number. We have the ships, right? And Davos is like, that's not a really good idea, but I guess he's in charge because he views himself as an upstart peasant. He's not gonna question no noble, and especially just being like just a random onion knight. He's not gonna question nobody. And then the Blackwater happens, and 3 of his sons were on those top 3 ships, so they instantly get incinerated right in front of him. And because of the chain, he can't go back. So the only way Davos was able to escape was diving into the water. And he had to be careful because, one, the current was so strong he could get pushed away and just drowned. And if he rised up, he could rise up under wildfire and catch on fire that way. And water doesn't extinguish wildfire. It sticks on you, right? And Davos is swept away from the current, all the way out to sea. He managed to swim under the chain, but he loses all his strength, and he's drifting at sea. So he gets lost in the Battle of the Blackwater. Tyrion is actually doing really good. He's going through the thrill, the momentum of battle. But one of the people right behind him tries to fucking kill him with a killing slice. And Tyrion has this squire who basically follows him. His name is Podrick Payne, who is like a cousin of Illian Payne, which is the executioner. Right? So he helps out Tyrion, pushing him, but it cuts the top brim of his nose. Right? Top brim of his nose is fucking gone, right? And he almost dies at the Battle of the Blackwater. Right? So all that shit happens, and like Stannis is still winning. He has so much numbers. He's managed to push through this, and they're like storming the capital. But then some crazy shit happens. Renly comes back to life wearing the antler helm, right? And all of the men that Stannis gained from like fighting, they go, "Oh my god, it's Renly! Oh my god, Renly!" Right? And they start attacking Stannis' flank, and he's forced to flee. And that's how, and it turns out it was Tywin Lannister with the power of High Garden, right? The House Tyrell, the only people who didn't side with Stannis, right? Throw their lot with the Lannisters, right? After that, they win the Battle of the Blackwater. The Lannisters win. The good guys win, guys. Woo! Tyrion, let's go! Yeah, it does. Took a nose, took a big W. But this celebration is not so sweet for Tyrion. Now that his father's here, he strips him of his status of Hand of the King and becomes, keeper of coin, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, something like the keeper of coin, or
He's demoted.
yeah, he's demoted to like.
Shekel holder.
Yeah, shekel holder, counting pennies, right? And it's like, what? He saved the people of King's Landing. If that change strategy wasn't implemented, like, King's Landing would be lost, but no one respects him because he's a fucking dwarf. His mountain men that he collected are dismissed. All the sellswords he has protecting him were bought off or swallowed up in the Blackwater. So he's alone with no allies, with no political power whatsoever. So he's back to square one, right? Which sucks a lot, right? We can't talk about that yet. That's later on. I'm thinking too far ahead. So now we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to, man, Stannis took some L's, bro. After Constantine. I gotta look at my notes, bro. Where's my phone? No, I'm fine. So, Battle of the Blackwater. Oh god. This is the end of Clash of Kings, I remember. So, a horrible event happened. Okay, you know how I talk about Theon Greyjoy, and the Greyjoys rise up, and they become like King Balon, right? And Theon is he's kind of like Tyrion, but it's funnier, because like, he's just like, what do you mean? I'm Theon Greyjoy. I'm the heir to the Iron Islands. Why don't you respect me? Because he's a stranger. Theon has been away from his homeland for so long that no one recognizes him. And he's barely an Iron Man. People view him as a Stark, as a wolf, not a Kraken, right? So he has this big chip on his shoulder, wanting to prove himself that, yeah, I'm a tough guy, I'm Theon Greyjoy. And that's how he talks in the audiobook. I'm Theon Greyjoy, right? And he does all this ways to kind of prove that he's Pod, that he's able to do anything, right? But he comes up with a plan. His dad wants him to just fucking raid Fishing Village on the north, and that's lame. He wants to take the capital, Winterfell. And who's better to take Winterfell than Theon Greyjoy, who lived there all his life for all his like 17, 18 years, right? Yeah, Theon's like 19, he's old, right? And he's ready to prove himself. And he convinces one of his uncles for the attack. So he captures Winterfell. He does this like maneuver when he, no joke, swims through like the gutters, and he like gets ropes, climbs up. So nobody knew that they were being attacked till it was too late. And there's no armies at Winterfell. There's no one holding Winterfell. Robb, King of the North, he's down at the south fighting Tywin Lannister, you know? And there's no other household guards to really defend from this many Iron Men coming, right? And there was a premonition by this kid named Jordan Reeds, right? Who has the green sight, which is like, basically you're able to see shit in the future, but they're all in metaphors, right? He sees a big tide drowning Winterfell. And Bran thinks it's an actual water tide, but no, it was the Ironborn, right? So they take over Winterfell, and Theon basically won against the Starks because he had both of the heirs of Robb, right? So if Robb dies, he owns it, and he owns the capital Winterfell. So if he exchanged the hostages, like, yeah, I have these hostages, call off your banners and make us independent and give us a bunch of land, or we kill your last heirs, right? So he has a big, but he wants the flags. He wants to be the prince of Winterfell, right? And there's this really cool moment when after he fucks the shit out of this girl, right? He's like annoyed because, you know, the Starks have dire wolves, right? They have wolves and they howl because, you know, they have a connection with their owners, with Bran and Rickon. These wolves always howl, right? And he fucking hates it. He's like, these fucking wolves that keep howling, right? And then one day, they're silent. And there's like an instinct in Theon. Why are they silent? Check on the wolves. Check on the wolves. They're gone. And Bran and Rickon are gone too, and two of his guards are dead. Right? So he's like, what's going on? Right? So he has to go look for these kids. They went into the woods. Right? That's what he thinks. Because the wolves are out there in the woods. Right? And it's like, dude, you know, the hunters can quickly become the hunted. So they give them a day. They wait till daybreak to go look for them. And they look for Bran and Rickon everywhere. Right? And Theon's like, fuck. I lost the heirs of Winterfell. I'm fucked. You know, I can't go back to the Iron Islands now. I'm gonna be a beta. You know, I'm not gonna be worthy of the Greyjoy names. You know, my father was right. I'm a loser. You know, I have to do something. So what he decides to do is he quote unquote finds Bran and Rickon and fucking kills them. Kills them both. Kills them. Gets like this 9-year-old boy and this 6-year-old boy, puts their heads on the top of Winterfell, right? And this fucking shocks everyone. It shocks especially Robb Stark and freaking Catelyn. Catelyn is like devastated, so devastated that both Cat and Robb does something extremely bad and like during this moment of grief, right? Because everyone loved Bran. He was like the sweetest kid. He was the coolest kid. Everyone loved Bran. He just climbed around. He was a sweet kid. And Rickon was so young. Both kids dead just like that, right? And Theon's sister, who is basically like kind of like a tomboy, she's like really strong. She's like good at throwing axes. She has a crew. Like the Ironborn, they kind of like, you know, they're not really cool with women. But if you have a ship, you are the king, right? You're the king of that ship, right? So each Ironborn person has this sense of like independence and pride. So she's able to feel that independence and pride. So she sails up to Winterfell to tell Theon that you're fucked. There's North people coming to you, and you could have won the war if you just kept the kids. I'm going to leave you with 10 men. I'm leaving you to your fate. You're a fool. And she leaves, right? And he's like, I can't believe this wench fucking said that to me. I'm the prince of Winterfell. But he feels like tremendous guilt too. He's like a big conflicting character because he's loyal to the Starks. He wanted to be like Robb and Jon and all the Starks, but Eddard always viewed him as a hostage, right? So he always felt separated, right? So he's not Stark and he's not a Greyjoy. It's been too long. Then who is he? You know, who is Theon Greyjoy? Who should he be loyal to? Who is he trying to be? So he does this rash thing to distinguish himself, right? And there's this disgusting dude in the dungeon, right? And he's been talked about for a long time. His name is Reek. He smells bad. He's Reek, right? They just call him Reek. He's known as the bastard's boy, right? There's this guy named Ramsay Snow who goes around fucking raping women, killing them, feeding them to dogs. It's like horrible shit, right? And there's this guy named Reek, right? In the dungeon because like Ramsay died by a bunch of arrows, right? And Reek is like, hey, I can get people to save you because people are storming Winterfell. So Theon's like, you know what? I trust you, dirty man, in this dungeon, right? And the dirty man in the dungeon, gives his word. He assists Theon. He kills all the Northmen. He betrays them. He convinces the Boltons, the people who are help invading Winterfell, to turn on the Castellan of Winterfell, killing him and killing all the Northmen around them. And then they raid the castle. And Theon's like, oh, thank you. What's your name, Reek? Or is it just Reek? You do smell. And he's like, nah, Reek died a long time ago. My name is Ramsay Bolton, right? And Bolton, he's not really a Bolton. He's a Snow. He's a bastard, right? He's not really the heir of House Bolton, right? And then there's something really wrong with this dude. He has a weird smile. He's looking at Theon in this predatory way, right? And the deal was, yeah, you break me out of prison, you get the men, you kill all the Winterfell men, and you can fuck my least favorite whore, right? That was the deal. That was the joke deal. And then he goes, no, I want to fuck your main bitch. And Theon's like, no, you can't. And then he gets punched and stabbed. He gets fucked up so bad that he can't even move anymore. And every Ironborn on that place dies, and he is betrayed by Ramsay Snow, right? And that's how the second book ends. But before that, a little stinger at the end, the epilogue. People come out of the Winterfell crypts. It's basically this underground hall under Winterfell where all the dead Starks live, right? Once you're the head of House Stark and you die, you go to the Winterfell crypts. So it turns out that Ramsay never killed Bran or Rickon. He killed 2 random kids and dipped their heads in tar, and that's how you preserve heads on spikes if you don't know, dip them in tar, right? So they were unrecognizable. So he could see them tough, right? But he was never able to find them, right? And they were just down there in the Winterfell crypts waiting for everyone to leave. And eventually they do after this big fight. And it turns out that Winterfell is burned, not by Theon Greyjoy, but by Ramsay Snow, right? So the capital of Winterfell is gone, and this starts the winter of King Robb's war effort. This is when he goes way, way down. He loses supports of everyone, because how are you going to support a king who just lost his house? He just lost his kingdom and both his heirs. So a lot of the people start doubting him, and his mom does the worst thing out of a moment of grief, because Brandon Rickon dies. She goes up to Jaime Lannister, and she's like, "You're a piece of shit. Tell me what happened." And Jaime, I don't think I'm going to get into Jaime, but he is he laughs at everything. Everything's a big joke to him. Honor, that bullshit. He'll laugh at it. Death, he laughs at it. Everything's like a meme. He doesn't take anything seriously, right? But Catelyn gave him okay wine, and he's been in chains and he smells like shit and it's terrible. So you might as well tell the truth, right? So she's like, "What happened with my son?" Right? And he's like, "I pushed him off a building. I thought he was gonna die, but he didn't. What a shame. It would have been good for him." Right? And Catelyn is so disgusted and so "You're a knight. You're supposed to defend the weak." And he's like, "Yeah, well, look what happened." Right? And it's just they keep talking about Bran and what happened. But the thing is, Catelyn still believed the Lannisters tried to kill Bran. Right? They still believe that. But each time with Tyrion, she interrogates Tyrion. He says, "I don't know where that dagger came from." Right? I owe it. Basically, Littlefinger tries to convince Cat that, I bet against an imp in this contest with Jaime Lannister, and he lost. So he got my Dragonbone dagger, right? To say, oh yeah, Tyrion got that Dragonbone dagger. But Tyrion never bets against his family. because Lannister pride. He loves his family despite how horrible they are. He never bets against his family. So Catelyn's like, that's weird, right? That's one. And Jaime says the same thing. I don't know what happened to your son. I don't know who tried to stab him. I just pushed him off the building. Why would I send in an assassin anyways? That's stupid. He was about to die anyways, right? So it's like, who tried to kill Bran? It's like this another mystery. So after like those talks and those words, she gets Jaime at sword point with Brienne, and she says, "Listen, I have two demands. One, never take up arms against House Tully. Two, get your brother Tyrion to get my little girl Sansa and Arya back." And she releases the best hostage House Stark has off with Brienne to do a hostage exchange to get Sansa Stark and Arya Stark back. And this is a big blow to the King of the North, right? Because that's the heir of House Lannister. The heir. What are you gonna do? Give Casterly Rock to Tyrion, the imp? No. No one respects Tyrion. But everyone loves Jaime Lannister. So it's like the big blunders. There's two big blunders, right? And the next one starts at the beginning of the third book, right? And that's how the pieces are so far. Like, the North is in decline, right? The Lannisters are living it up, right? They're doing pretty good after the Battle of the Blackwater. And Stannis is alone on Dragonstone, wallowing in defeat. And Balon Greyjoy and Theon is missing, but Balon Greyjoy dies mysteriously. No one knows why Balon Greyjoy died. People say he fell off a bridge, right? And he did. He fell off a bridge. They found his bloated body. But some people think that someone pushed him off that bridge, right? So in the third book, the Ironborn aren't a big thing because they're having a civil war for who's going to be the next king of the Iron Islands, right? And that's the end of Clash of Kings, right? Fuck, man, only 3 more books. Only three more books, bro. The third book's always the best.
It's just turned 11.
Wait, 11?
Yeah, it's 11 right now.
Shit. You guys want to do one more break, or you think we can try to push this?
I'm gonna get that break real quick.
Right, right.
This is gonna be my first
20-minute break, brother.
I don't know, I could